There is a moment in every financial cycle where the noise gets loud, but the truth goes quiet. Headlines keep smiling. Agents keep selling hope. Politicians keep promising stability. And underneath all of it, something far more dangerous is happening. Slow, measurable damage that most people won't recognize until it's already too late. This is not a prediction. This is not fear-mongering. This is a post-mortem in progress. Right now, while many Americans are still being told that the economy is cooling but healthy, foreclosure filings are climbing at a pace that historically only appears after recessions begin. Home values are slipping at the same time household costs are rising. And the states that are about to feel the worst of it aren't random. They share the same structural weaknesses, the same policy failures, and the same fragile housing dynamics. History doesn't repeat itself loudly. It repeats quietly through spreadsheets, court filings, insurance premiums, inventory charts, and budget gaps. That's where the real story lives. What you're about to hear is not about one bad market or a temporary slowdown. It's about 13 states where three destructive forces are colliding at once: rising foreclosures, falling prices, and governments that no longer have the financial strength to step in when things break. Some of these states used to be considered untouchable. Others were marketed as safe havens. A few were growth darlings just a few years ago. All of them are now flashing the same warning signs. If you own property in any of these places, this information isn't optional. It's survival knowledge. We are going to walk through the mechanics of what's happening, then break down the states already showing crisis-level conditions using late 2025 data. This is happening now, not later. And by the time the mainstream conversation catches up, the damage will already be locked in. Let's begin with the forces driving this collapse. The three pressures breaking these states. First, foreclosure activity is accelerating during what is still being labeled an economic expansion. That should never happen at scale. When foreclosures rise sharply while employment data still looks relatively stable, it means households are breaking under structural pressure, not job loss alone. That kind of stress does not reverse easily. Second, prices are weakening while distressed properties are increasing. This combination destroys equity. Once equity disappears, homeowners stop fighting to stay afloat. Strategic defaults rise, inventory floods the market, and prices fall faster than policymakers expect. Third, state governments are financially cornered. Many of these states are already dealing with deficits, debt, or pension obligations so large that intervention is no longer realistic. When housing cracks, there is no backstop left. Now, let's look at where this is already unfolding. Number 1. California, Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Bernardino. California's housing crisis is not a single failure. It is multiple systems breaking at the same time. The state is carrying a massive budget shortfall, measured in the tens of billions of dollars, while total long-term liabilities push toward $500 billion. At the same time, California is losing more residents than any other state in the country. That population loss is not abstract. It directly weakens housing demand, tax revenue, and local economies. Inventory levels have exploded. In counties like San Bernardino and Kings, active listings have more than doubled. Homes are sitting longer. Days on market have stretched significantly compared to just a year ago. In a state built on speed and scarcity, that slowdown is a structural shift, not a seasonal pause. Unemployment is rising faster than the national average, and price declines are no longer isolated. Sacramento, San Luis Obispo, and several inland markets are already slipping into negative territory. These are not distressed regions. These were supposed to be anchors. California's business base is shrinking as well. Corporate relocations and headquarters exits have drained high-income earners from the tax system. At the same time, unfunded pension obligations continue to grow, pulling resources away from everything else. Housing cannot stabilize in a state where residents are leaving, employers are relocating, inventory is rising, and government finances are already strained. California isn't approaching a housing problem. It is already inside one. Number 2. Florida, Miami, Cape Coral, Sarasota. Florida sits at the epicenter of the foreclosure surge. The state now records the highest foreclosure concentration in the country, with one filing for roughly every 1,800 housing units. In a single recent month, more than 5,000 properties entered foreclosure. That number alone would be alarming. Combined with falling prices, it becomes explosive. What makes Florida uniquely dangerous is that this collapse is not being driven by interest rates. It's being driven by costs. Homeowners cannot escape. Insurance premiums have surged beyond $11,000 per year on average, more than 4 times the national norm. For many households, the mortgage is no longer the problem. The house itself has become unaffordable to keep. Inventory is ballooning across once hot metros. Miami listings linger longer than anywhere else in the country. Cape Coral, Northport, Sarasota, and Fort Lauderdale have all seen massive year-over-year increases in available homes. This is not confidence. This is forced selling. Population trends have reversed. Domestic migration has slowed dramatically, and the state has even recorded natural population decline. Florida's entire growth model depended on constant inflows. Without them, demand collapses faster than prices can adjust. Florida isn't facing a downturn. It's facing a cost-driven exit spiral, and once that starts, it accelerates on its own. Number 3. Texas, Austin, Dallas, Houston. Texas is learning what happens when growth assumptions outlive reality. The state built aggressively for a migration boom that no longer exists. Net domestic inflows have dropped by more than half, yet construction continued at near-record levels. Today, Texas holds one of the most oversupplied housing markets in the country. Inventory is more than 50% above normal. Active listings exceed 120,000 homes. Demand is cooling, but supply keeps rising. That imbalance always ends the same way. Austin is already paying the price. Price declines there are projected to exceed 12%, a dramatic reversal for a city once treated as bulletproof. Other metros are not far behind. Texas doesn't have a housing shortage problem anymore. It has a timing problem. When demand fades and inventory piles up, prices fall quickly, especially in markets built on momentum rather than scarcity. Number 4. New York City, Buffalo. New York's crisis begins in commercial real estate and spreads outward. Office vacancy rates in Manhattan approach 1/5 of all space. Rents are falling. Property values are under pressure. Banks and lenders tied to these assets are absorbing losses that don't stay contained. At the same time, New York carries hundreds of billions in debt and ongoing structural deficits. Population losses have accelerated, draining both income and consumer spending. Tens of billions in personal income have already left the state. When commercial cores weaken, residential housing follows. Jobs disappear, municipal budgets shrink, services decline, housing demand erodes. This is not a housing-only problem. It is a cascading economic breakdown with housing caught in the middle. Number 5. Colorado, Denver, Boulder. Colorado delivered the biggest foreclosure shock in the nation. Filings surged by 145% in a single year. That kind of increase does not happen quietly, and it does not reverse easily. At the same time, the state flipped from surplus to deficit in under 12 months, revealing how fragile recent growth really was. Inventory now exceeds pre-pandemic levels. 1 out of every 4,500 homes is already in foreclosure. Denver's office market remains weak. Remote work has reduced demand permanently. Development was built for a world that no longer exists. Colorado's story is a warning. Apparent stability can hide explosive vulnerability. Number 6. Illinois, Chicago. Illinois is trapped in a slow-motion collapse. The state carries one of the worst pension funding gaps in the country, with liabilities so large they crowd out every other priority. Debt levels are extreme. Pension coverage is dangerously low. Residents continue to leave. That shrinks the tax base, forcing either higher taxes or service cuts, both of which accelerate outmigration. Foreclosures remain elevated, even as select markets show temporary price strength. That contradiction never lasts. When recession pressure hits, the correction will be brutal. Illinois has no financial room left to respond when housing stress deepens. Number 7. South Carolina, Charleston, Columbia, Greenville. South Carolina is one of the most underestimated housing risks in the country right now. It holds the second highest foreclosure concentration nationwide, with one foreclosure for roughly every 1,900 homes. That statistic alone places it in crisis territory. What makes it worse is how widespread the damage already is. This is not a single city problem. Multiple counties are deteriorating at the same time. Dorchester, Kershaw, Berkeley, and Oconee counties are all seeing elevated foreclosure activity simultaneously. That kind of geographic spread signals systemic pressure, not isolated borrower failure. When stress shows up everywhere at once, it usually means incomes, employment stability, or household costs are failing in parallel. South Carolina's economy is heavily dependent on manufacturing and tourism. Those sectors are highly sensitive to downturns. When discretionary spending tightens or industrial demand softens, layoffs arrive quickly and ripple outward. Housing rarely gets advance notice. The state also lacks deep fiscal reserves. It does not have the budget flexibility to deploy large-scale relief programs if housing conditions worsen. That means foreclosures feed directly into inventory. Inventory pushes prices down, and prices falling erase homeowner equity faster than policymakers can react. South Carolina is not loud about its problems. It doesn't need to be. The data already tells the story. Number 8. Nevada, Las Vegas, Reno. Nevada lives and dies by confidence. Its economy depends on visitors spending money they don't strictly need to spend. When consumers pull back, Nevada feels it before almost anyone else. That sensitivity is now showing up clearly. The state recorded the highest unemployment rate in the country recently, and joblessness remains elevated even as other states stabilized. Housing has begun to respond. Prices are already slipping in Las Vegas and Reno, markets that historically move fast in both directions. In Reno, values have dropped several percentage points. Las Vegas is softer, but trending the same way. These are early moves, not the full adjustment. In a tourism-driven economy, housing corrections often accelerate suddenly rather than gradually. Nevada also depends on visitors from other states, many of which are now under their own housing and economic pressure. When fewer people travel, fewer dollars circulate, fewer jobs stay intact, and housing demand weakens quickly. This is how double exposure works. Nevada is vulnerable both to its own internal slowdown and to the weakness spreading outward from the rest of the country. Number 9. New Jersey, Newark. Jersey City. New Jersey sits at the intersection of rising foreclosures and massive long-term obligations. The state carries roughly $92 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, translating into one of the highest per-resident burdens in the nation. At the same time, foreclosure activity has quietly moved into the top tier nationally. What makes this especially concerning is that home prices have continued to rise recently. That combination, higher prices and higher foreclosures, is not a sign of strength. It's a sign that carrying costs have outpaced household capacity. New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the country. Even modest increases in unemployment or insurance costs push homeowners toward default, regardless of market value. Equity does not help if monthly expenses become unmanageable. Unemployment is already trending upward. Pension math leaves the state with two options: higher taxes or reduce services. Both outcomes place additional strain on homeowners and accelerate housing stress. New Jersey doesn't need a severe recession to tip over. It just needs conditions to stop improving. Number 10. Connecticut, Hartford, New Haven. Connecticut is not collapsing suddenly. It is eroding steadily. The state carries the highest per capita liability burden in the country. Pension obligations remain enormous, and demographic trends make them nearly impossible to resolve. The population is shrinking, and the remaining population is aging. That demographic imbalance creates a fiscal trap. Fewer working-age residents must support a growing retiree base. Over time, that math breaks housing demand. Young families leave. New buyers disappear. Sellers age in place until they can't. Unemployment has risen modestly, but credit stress is already spreading. Utility providers have faced rating downgrades, a sign that financial strain is moving beyond government balance sheets and into essential services. Housing in Connecticut is caught between high costs and declining demand. That is not a market that rebounds quickly. It grinds lower. Number 11. Arizona. Phoenix. Tucson. Arizona crossed the affordability line and didn't notice until it was too late. In just a few years, the state shifted from broadly affordable to structurally expensive. Rapid price growth outpaced income growth, and recent budget fixes eliminated any meaningful fiscal cushion. Housing prices have already begun to fall in markets like Tucson, and forward-looking risk models now assign a high probability of continued declines. That matters because Arizona's recent growth was built on affordability. Once that disappears, demand weakens fast. The state also reduced long-term revenue capacity through tax changes made during stronger economic conditions. That leaves little room to respond if housing stress accelerates. Arizona's vulnerability is not about excess supply or population loss yet. It's about affordability failure paired with limited fiscal flexibility. That combination rarely ends gently. Number 12. Oregon, Portland, Salem. Oregon is sending one of the clearest labor market warning signals in the country. Unemployment jumped sharply during what is still labeled an expansion. That should not happen. When joblessness rises this fast outside a recession, it usually means structural weaknesses are already in motion. Oregon's tax system is highly dependent on high-income earners. That makes revenue volatile during downturns. As employment weakens and incomes fluctuate, fiscal stability disappears precisely when it is needed most. Commercial real estate stress continues to build in Portland. Remote work has permanently reduced demand, weakening downtown cores and adjacent housing markets. At the same time, many housing markets remain overvalued relative to income. Foreclosures are already rising, and price growth is slowing toward negative territory. When overvaluation meets economic softening, corrections tend to overshoot. Oregon doesn't face one problem. It faces several that reinforce each other. Number 13. Delaware. Wilmington. Delaware's size is its biggest risk. The state recorded the highest bankruptcy rate in the country recently, with more than 1% of all businesses filing in a single year. That level of stress spreads fast in a small economy. Foreclosure rates are already among the worst nationwide. Unemployment has risen noticeably. In a state without deep economic diversification, shocks don't stay contained. They ripple outward quickly. Delaware is also tightly linked to surrounding states that are already under pressure. Weakness in nearby regions spills across borders, compounding the damage. When downturns hit small states, they hit harder. Delaware lacks the scale to absorb prolonged stress. If there is one thing these 13 states have in common, it is this: the usual shock absorbers are gone. Foreclosures are rising before a recession has even been officially declared. Prices are weakening while inventory builds. Governments are already constrained by debt, deficits, or demographic decline. This is not a forecast, it is documentation. Housing crises do not begin when prices fall. They begin when affordability breaks, when equity disappears, and when institutions lose the ability to respond. That process is already underway. Some states are facing cyclical overbuilding. Others are trapped in long-term fiscal decay. A few are being crushed by costs that households cannot escape. Different causes. Same outcome. If you live in one of these states, pay attention to three things: foreclosure filings in your county, inventory growth relative to sales, and your state's financial capacity to intervene. Those signals matter more than headlines. The data from late 2025 is not warning about the future. It is recording the present. The housing crisis is not coming. It is already here, and it is accelerating fastest where the foundation was weakest to begin with. What are you seeing where you live?